Hi, I'm Francois from Production Music Live, today with Producer Notes, and we're taking a look at a classic, legendary trance anthem here, the style of Airbase Escape. Modeled after this track, different chords, melodies and harmonies and PML sounds used here for the samples, for the presets. We are only working with Ableton Live Suite, stock effects and instruments plus Serum. Nothing else used here, and we are modeling it after the reference track to figure out how the sound was put together. And we have 135 BPM here, and quickly taking an arrangement overview. So we're starting with an intro. And then bass and kick are coming in. And then the typical trance buildup is introduce one element after another. Some perks are coming in to support the hi-hat loop here. And some acid lines on top, and then you bring in more hi-hats. Chord stabs and everything, you start introducing some arpeggio or key or something like that, in this case here. This one. And also we are keeping the bass notes constant, because in trance kind of the big moment is the first time the bass note is changing below your, progression. And that's when the tension is being released. So far we are building up the tension. It actually takes 3 minutes to build it up here. You have these mini breaks. So everything builds up and builds up. And then at some point, sometimes you can go into the break right here, or this one is being prolonged with this kind of pre-break where the hats and claps and everything is turned off, and we just remain with the kick that's getting a bit filtered then. Okay, and then everything falls into the drop right around 3 minutes here. We're sort of introducing the chord progression here, and then the actual start of the plugs, the leads, filtered down is happening at 3:30 after this bass growl. Absolute goosebump moment, and then it winds down quickly, and then the full drum package is coming in. Absolute uplifting anthem style here. And then the outro is basically a copy of the intro or the build-up. And it mirrors what was built up here and it gets built down again. So these are, you know, this is the arrangement overview. Let's quickly listen to the drums group in solo. Very straightforward, and also here in the beginning it has a couple of perk elements. And then what is our bass group doing here on the bass named group? It's funny how that sounds alone. Here we have this nice and interesting growl sound. And the instruments group, quickly checking into that one. And in the very beginning. And then in the drop. Sorry, in the break. And then in the drop. And here in the effects section we have a bunch of noises and crashes and this square sound for transitions. So before we start to look at the elements one by one here, who's the artist? Jesper Solerlund, Swedish trance legend. I actually started making music, producing trance, and that was one of my idols. Released as Airbase, released under guises such as Ra, great tracks there. Mono, also great tracks. Ozone, Interstate, a track called Changes. What a great piece of music. And he's released on all major trance labels and also ran Trance and U, great community back in the day with a group of people. So those were some great times for trance. I'm linking to an interesting video with him in the description. And now let's take a look at the single elements here one by one. And actually let's start with our drums group and maybe even do it here in the beginning, where we have a kick, a typical trance kick. And it's not unusual, by the way, that, you know, whatever snare Phil is usually doing can be done with a kick as well in trance. Just filtered in here and volume down a bit. So if we quickly take a look at the automations. And then a trance kick is super powerful and is actually also quite long because it's serving a lot of the low end already, because your trance bass sometimes can be very, you know, 16th note oriented and actually a bit higher up. It's not that subby. So then you need a longer clap sound on top of that trance kick. So longer tail on that sound. It's not that snappy and short here. And again, if you see something like this, keep in mind we're modeling this after a reference track, then using different chords and melodies and harmonies, but we're still trying to sort of match the EQ frequency curve of the original, and that's why we are sometimes carving in or out some frequencies here. That looks a bit funny. Well, let's actually start with the closed hi-hat here, 16s ones. Velocities set up to sound differently. This one is emphasizing on the first. And then we have an offbeat type hi-hat here on this track with an audio file. And this one is just clean. And whereas this one is a bit more, you can see it here in the spectrum, is a bit more pan to the left, already in the sample. and the off one is sitting in the middle. And then also we are putting a longer ride sound on top of that with quite a bit of tail here. You can listen to that one. Just for the high end here. And then we're filling out everything else with this hi-hat loop, soloing that one quickly. And there's a lot of hi-hat loops that we'll do here, but this one works nicely on this group. So a trance drum setup is not super complicated, I would say. And in the beginning of the track, we're also using these little percussive elements here. Quick 2 notes here, and then in the offbeat position, you also have this other single note. So this is repeating over time. And let's quickly listen to this one in solo. Kind of almost like a rim shot snare type setup here. Okay, together with our kick. And there we go. These are our drums already perfectly set up here to work with this track. So zooming out, this is the processing on our group, gluing it together with the full parallel drum preset from the glue compressor and the audio effects. And then mainly adding some saturation on top, where it's getting a bit more aggressive. And you can see nothing here on the return channels. By the way, let's quickly look at them. 7 seconds of decay time with this reverb on Hall. Echo is ping pong 3x3 repitch mode. Feedback 20%, 21%. And age delay, this one is being used heavily in this track for all these instrumental elements. And it's kind of a copy of the Waves age delay. And on our master, we have compression, bit of saturation, just like on our drums group there. And then we have our limiters to get the sound loud. And we also have a utility with an automation here that's basically a fade out at the end, because we have these long tails behind the sound. So going over to the bass group, bass line, and then we have the Reese bass and the growl separately. In the bass line, we can start maybe with looking at bass plug 1. As a typical trance bass setup, you usually use octaves here. And here's where our kick is playing. So low octave on the second, and then high octave on third and fourth. And then we repeat that, but you can also set this one down, or, you know, often this one is the high note and everything else is low, but here we're even alternating between that. So 2 high on 2 and 3 and 4 down, and here's 3 and 4 and 2 down. But this is how you keep your trance bass interesting. And this one here is just taking the volume down. It's an utility, nothing fancy there. And then if you take a look at Serum, this is what we're playing here: saw wave and sine wave, an octave higher. And then we're sending oscillator A through the filter here with this envelope shape, 174 milliseconds of decay time, adding a bit of detuning here on the sound as well. And if you look at the matrix, this is the only mapping that's going on here. And we're rolling off some high frequency information with this EQ. So that's sound number 1. And then we have another sound. Playing the same notes. And now this is the wider sound. So let's take a look. We have Icon has kick 2 octaves down, 1 octave down, both run through the filter here with this envelope. Decay is 214. We're also adding detuning to the sound, a bit of delay, which you can hear ping-ponged around your ears. And then rolling off low end with this EQ already. And in the matrix, again, we just have envelope 2 controlling the filter cutoff here. And then we are carving out all this frequency information here. We basically just need this part. So together, those 2 bass sounds. Okay, and now we have a sub below that, down here, placed in this frequency range and also sidechained heavily to our kick. What's going on here in this sound? Let's actually listen to it first. And this one is heavily affected by the sidechains and sounds a bit weird if we play it in solo, but at the end of the day, it needs to work in the mix context. So we have -2 octaves on the sine wave here. Nothing in the effects section, nothing in the matrix section. So what really matters is the shape of this envelope with a decay time of 516 milliseconds. But, you know, it's getting heavily ducked by the sidechain before it even gets there. Because if we put the kick together with it. And now the bass plugs on top. Yeah, there we go. And on the group, we just have a filter, so we are able to distribute that over the arrangement of the song. And then what's on top here with this bass saw? So we have this higher element, and that's kind of funny and weird sometimes in trance. You have these sounds. Would you play that? Would you think that this is a good sound for any track if you play it in solo? But this one is adding this higher frequency information on top that then rounds it up nicely. Also panning that. So you have a nice stereo image on that sound as well, up there where it doesn't really mess up in any club mono setting. And kick below. And then if you add the cymbals, everything is back in order. Okay, 2 more bass elements. We have the Reese bass, simple one here in our break part. So very straightforward, the sound, 16 voices here of a saw wave, 2 octaves down and 3 octaves down a sine wave. Below that, just 1 voice. Both go through the filter. Very straightforward. An interesting sound here, this growl. Nice frequency modulation on top of that sound. This one is useful for all kinds of genres. So let's take a look at this sound, how it's put together. Let's actually quickly take this EQ off here. That is an awesome sound. And how do you put it together? You basically have oscillator B at 0, but you're taking the frequency modulation here from oscillator B. So we have a saw wave in oscillator A, 3 octaves down, and then we're throwing that shape here as a frequency modulation on top, and that's how we're achieving the sound. If I'm turning this off, typical saw wave. And actually there's some effects on top of that one. It's slightly detuned. It's also having this reverb tail, 4.7 seconds. And it has a delay, a ping pong delay on top of it as well. That's what you hear here. And in the matrix, we have the mod wheel controlling the filter cutoff. So this is what we are seeing here in our automation. If we quickly take a look at what it's doing, here we go. And now the sound really gets interesting if you activate oscillator B with a sine wave and then put the frequency modulation in here at 53%. Now you can also use that one in melodic techno. All kinds of genres are possible here. So that's the bass group. Let's go over to the instruments group here and start maybe with these keys. So F minor being played out here, F the root note, G on or is that A flat, the, you know, third? Let's actually put it in quickly here so we can take a look at it. A flat, and then we have C as the fifth. Sixth, quickly played again to make it interesting. What is the sound doing? We have a long tail. We are already sending the sound, in this case through the send effects here, through this echo. And then you can also see C is active. That's because the entire group is being sent into, like the entire instruments group is being sent into this H delay here. That's why we have these long tails. And also it's being sent through this reverb. So we have reverb on all the following elements that we are looking at now. Just keep that in mind. Yeah, pulse waves, 2 pulse waves. This one is an octave up. This is the effect section here. Stop the screen if you want to copy the settings of this sound. And we're moving on, taking a look at the next block. So, nice little arp here. So, root note, fifth on top there. Third here, second here. It's actually an added tone chord. It's an F minor added 2. These always sound nice as well. In solo, the sound sounds a bit wacky, but it's here for the context. That's why we need this higher frequency information up there. What's going on? Envelope 2, again, controlling this low pass 18 decibels per octave filter. And then we have 3 saw wavetables next, stacked wave to one another. And then we have this baller, which adds this crisp on top. The resonance there in the sound. This is our effects section on this sound. Again, feel free to stop the playback to, you know, copy the settings from the screen. And then this is the matrix of the sound. Nothing crazy going on here. And we can move on to the next sound. So that's typical trance. You start introducing, you start building up your intro, and then you start stacking some harmonic information or plugs on top. And in this case here, we're playing the fifth and a note higher up. And sound here in this case not really that important, you know, just needs to be filtered a little bit with the cutoff there. What is going on in the matrix? We have the mod wheel controlling the filter, so we can open that up over time. And we can take a look at what it looks like actually over time here. So this one is coming in, and then, you know, it's also taken out at some points again. Because we have this quite long phase of build-up here, and, you know, by adding these types of automations, you keep the movement interesting. Try to listen to it. Okay, and we have another 2 elements down here. One is called key. What's going on there? Very similar. You know, and it's actually sitting in the same position. Quickly taking a look at that sound as well. And this one is a bit wider. 7 voices here of a saw wave, 9 voices of a square wave. Again, short decay time on the filter pluckiness, and delay EQ not really doing that much. And then the matrix, we can see we just have this envelope controlling the filter. So there's that sound. Next one here. And so we also have an F minor chord here. That's the root note. And if we bring down G, or A flat. There you go. There's your chord and the root note up there as well. One more time. And this one is also a plucky setup in Serum. 10 voices over saw wave and then again sent through the filter here. And then we are using the arpeggiator to turn this long held MIDI chord into an arpeggio. Turning it off. We're just saying go up, ba-da-da-dum, and do that with a rate of 16 notes. And then we're telling it to cover an octave. Let's try to listen to this in context. Filling out the frequency information there. Next element is this lead low. So it's playing 16th notes here and being ducked with a sidechain, and 2 times we're stopping it at this kick point and that kick point. These are also clap positions. And again, looking at the sound quickly here, saw wave, sine wave, 2 octaves down, 1 octave down. And in this case, we have a comp filter here. So what is envelope 2 doing? Let's quickly look at the matrix. It's controlling the distortion amount here. And then the pluckiness is already coming from envelope 1. And again, this is through the group already being sent into the reverb and the H delay. And by itself, it's not being sent to anything on top. So this works nicely because we already have that many, 16th notes playing. And below that now we're playing this acid line. That's very, very typical for trance build-ups, to put that in to have this crunchy and more dark feel before you open it up and sun is coming out and the melodies are starting to play. So what is the MIDI looking like? In this case, we also have 16th notes, but shortened, so we have a gap in between always. Octaves. Rolling off low-end information, also a bit more of that on the side. And here we are just taking down 8 decibels from the sound. Mod wheels being automated over time or automated in. Okay, let's take a look at the sound itself. And we can see again saw wave and sine wave next to it. And so how do we achieve this acid type feel on top? We need the resonance. If I'm turning down the resonance from 65 to 0. Yeah, character is very different, so back up. '65 sits nicely here. These are effects on top, and this is our matrix. Okay, below that, quick sine pad or sine note actually. Just a 5th high up for tension. Just a sine wave. Nothing crazy there. And so I'm moving over to the next element, which is also pad sine waves. They're playing in the intro, and later they're also introducing our break part here. So very long attack time here on envelope 1. What's going on? Then we have a long reverb, 6 seconds of decay time, and that's it. Okay, next sound below that, pad saw in the build-up. Again, playing F minor. This one is an octave up, our third. And we have a wider sound with lots of voices here. That's 8 saw waves stacked and sent through a filter. And then later in our break part, this one is actually playing the chord progression. So let's look at that quickly. And unscale it. So what's going on here? F minor, followed by D flat major. That's a major quality of a chord. If I'm bringing this down, we can see it. 3 semitones in between, 2 semitones in between the third and the root note. And then, also a major chord here, we have E flat major. I can bring this up an octave, then we can see it. 3 semitones in between, 2 semitones in between. If you want to learn more about harmony and chord progressions, feel free to check out our music theory course. I'm linking that in the description. Also, quite usual for trance progressions, you kind of repeat the progression, but you exchange the first chord. So in this case, we are playing the same chords at the end. So that's D flat major and E flat major, but we exchanged the first chord, and this is now C minor. So bring G up, we can see it, minor chord in between, minor third in between, major third in between. And that's our progression. So F minor here and C minor here. And that's how we almost play the same progression, but it sounds like a different second part and keeps it interesting. So. And that's really something we can work with. We can play a lot of interesting movement on top of that. And then we have our second pad sitting below that. Playing the same thing, but we are an octave higher with this one, and we are just playing these saw waves here. Slow attack as well. Sending this through a 24 decibels per octave filter. Effects, reverb and low cut, and nothing on the matrix that shows up. Okay, then we can look at our main protagonist here, which is this main lead that's now playing on top of the chord progression that we just looked at. So this lead here, 3 stacked sounds and filtered down and opened up. Let's look at the MIDI. So we were playing F minor. Here's our root note in the beginning. And so we have like the melody is basically resting on the third of our scale. That's the 5th. And then that's the root note. Again, the 5th and the root note, and this is super stable harmonically speaking. That's why it sounds so beautiful as well. Yeah, and many trance anthems are working in a way where you have the melody basically playing the offbeat position and the kick is playing on beat, and you don't really need much more than that because you're playing at 135 BPM, so there's not that much room between these notes anyways. Okay, so let's study the sounds here one by one that are stacked together. I'm just soloing this one quickly, and we're starting with the first sound that's stacked in there. So wide, 16 voices of saw wave, 14 voices of saw wave, an octave lower, and then no filter applied here. Envelope 1 looks like this. Decay time is 1 second, so we want this to play out long. In our effects section we have quite the open reverb, 8 seconds of decay time, and we're rolling off the low end here below, what is that, 550, 560. And the filtering on this sound is taking place later here in our processing chain, where we have this auto filter. And this one is automating the filter movement of the entire stack of Serum instances over time. So it's down, dreamy. And then it opens up. So second part of the sound, that's a square wave, or 13 of them. And it got a bit of chorus on top to emphasize on the squariness. And the last sound, now we need something more centered. Saw rounded to square here, and this one has some pitchy action going on here. So let's take a look at the matrix. There's a lot going on here. Basically envelope 2 controlling the filter cutoff, but we're also slightly controlling our pitches of oscillator A, the coarse pitches. So it's a bit of, you know, it gets this pitchiness at the beginning, and also setting to mono. And also setting it to portamento always applied. Again, bringing the pitchy character at the beginning of the note. Going to copy the settings, stop your screen here, quickly showing everything. Not really having time to go all the way through these elements one by one here, but people sometimes comment, hey, can you show everything? So that's what I'm trying to do here. Then we roll off low-end information on this sound and taking out some of those nasty high frequencies on the sides in the stereo spectrum. Let's turn this on and off. And then we are essentially trimming, you know, 7 decibels with the utility here. There's not much more going on than that. And then delay, 3x3 delay, ping pong, feedback, 50%, dry wet, 50%. That's a lot. This is applied on everything, on all these 3 elements. So if we are going back and combining them, they're basically, they have, you know, shapes where we are rolling off some too nasty high frequencies on those sounds. And also here we're doing the same thing, as you can see there. So we are making sure it's not too crisp up there, and that could be a little disturbing as well. And this one, the first one here, gets a bit more width through this utility. Again, modeled after a reference track. And that's where sometimes these curves look a bit funny, but all together they're created to sort of match the frequency curve of the reference track. Yeah, and below that we have this higher frequent chord saw, because our pads down here were more dreamy. And now we are in the high energy part, so we need some more energy in this chord progression as well. So it's the same progression as we were looking at before, and we have stacked saw waves. Maximum amount, super detuned, ran through a filter, reverb on top of that, cutting the lows. Mod wheel controls the filter cutoff over time, so we can bring that fuzziness in here whenever needed from And finally, I think we still need to cover these little chord steps here. It's very typical in trance. You can also find that in tracks from the Thrill Seekers and stuff like that, where at the beginning of a longer pattern, like 16 or 8 bars, you're playing a chord stab and then it fades out over time. Let's play these 3 together. And so how they're put together. This is again F minor. Stacked saw waves. Not going too much into detail here. And then bit more grit on this sound. Filter more opened. And lead. Yeah, and there we have the 5th sitting on top of everything with 10 saw waves. And that's what our filter looks like here. Bit of reverb, nothing crazy going on. All together, they're always playing together, so we need to look at the sum. And they're sort of acting like an impact here when the kick is coming in. And you can see them coming in here and there and everywhere whenever like a major change or major impact or major part is starting again or repeating again. And so the last instrumental element here is this little plug sign that's just, you know, it's almost like acting like a piano here in our break part, in the beginning of the break part. Yeah, and that's just sine wave action here with a sine wave. And it's playing together with this deep pad. Okay, moving over to the next element here, this effects section and square transition. What's going on here? Listen in. Super often used in trance as well. Stacked square waves. And then we're controlling the pitch bend upwards. Stop the screen to copy the settings if you want to. And the mod wheel is controlling the noise level and the volume. And the pitch bend is controlling the pitch. And so these things get added in here over time. One is the mod wheel and the other one is the pitch bend. And that's what it looks like. So this creates your nice transition effects. Let's listen into that. Combining that with crashes and so you don't need a reverse transition element here. This one is taking care of that. And then we have this noise. On these super high energy parts, we are mixing in a bit of noise on top. Okay, and the last one to check out is this little vocal chop here, which is getting mixed in. From one of the PML vocalized packs, linking them in the description as well. And this one is just sitting in there to keep it interesting here. Okay, and then you might be wondering what's up with this send here. That is sidechain. What's going on? So all these 3 return channels here are not going directly into the master, but they're going into the sends, and then from there they're going to the master. So we have sidechain and all these tails here to keep it a bit more clean. Alright, so a summary of the key elements of this style. We are at 135 BPM here for trance. We're playing a powerful trance kick, longer tail. This one really contains a lot of the low-end information that we're going to have, and then we have this rolling bass line below it, stacked layers. And you typically use octave jumps. And one layer that sort of is more clean, like this bass plug 1. And then another one that's a bit more wide. And a lot of the low information already cut out of the sound. And then you have another one that is a bit of sparkly on top of it. And then, depending on how you put the frequency together here, you have a sub below everything. Together with the kick. And then the long tail trance clap on top of that. And then the drumming gets very straightforward with 16s closed hi-hats. Offbeat hi-hat. And for high-end information, a ride in the offbeat position, longer tail on the ride. And then a hi-hat loop to fill out the gaps in between. And then we are playing our main lead on top of all of that, stacked saws. Super stable melody sitting on the 3rd, sometimes jumping to the 5th and sometimes jumping to the root note F. Stacked layers for powerful sound, as we are working only with Serum and Ableton here. And typical for trance anthems to play it in the offbeat position. Then a bunch of pads stacked over the frequency range. One here for high frequency information. And then we have a bunch more below for more mid frequencies. And another one covering the space in between. All of them together. And then it's not uncommon to have chord stabs at the beginning of an 8-bar loop or a 16-bar loop or something like that, like we have here with these 3. They are sort of coming in on impact, stay for a bit, and then fade out. This is very typical for trance arrangements as well. And in a build-up part, for example, you introduce these acid leads on top for creating tension and a bit more dark vibe. Short 16s notes here, adding to building up the tension in the intro build-up part. And arrangement-wise, we can say it's very typical for these uplifting trance tracks to build up tension on keeping the root note in your bass constant, building it up, adding in arps and stuff, and then going into a break or some kind of mini break part where you then start to exchange the lowest note in your bass, and that's where the harmonic feeling opens up, the sun goes up, and the harmonic pleasant part of the track really starts. And in this case, very straightforward trance arrangement. Build up is lasting around 3 minutes, and you build it back a bit right towards the break part. Reese bass, building up here your main lead, down filtered in the beginning and then opening up, and then kick, drop, and then playing the theme 1 time, and then a full drop, playing the theme 2 times, and then winding it down into an outro. Super straightforward here. We'll have a full playback in a second. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this little walkthrough for this classic uplifting trance anthem style in the style of trance legend Jesper Söderlund from Sweden. Feel free to check out the links in the description for this new trance pack on PML with 8 project files, full sample pack, loops and one-shots, full preset pack for Serum with MIDIs for each preset so you can get started right away. Also, check out the arrangement course from PML, linking that in the description, the music theory, harmony and melody course. Also, if you're interested in drum samples, check out the D Premium Drum series. And if you're saying, hey, all of this stuff sounds fantastic, check out the Everything Bundle, best deal in the store, best way to support our work here. I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you for your time and attention, and let's have a full playback.